Just a fair warning before truly beginning this video, while I will be using jokes to ease attention and will not be going seriously in depth, this video does obviously address the concept of mental health, and if that bothers you, which makes complete sense, feel free to watch absolutely anything else. Likewise, I think it's worth clarifying that I'm certainly not an expert on this topic, so take my view of mental health with a grain of salt. And with that out of the way, enjoy the ride. Mental health is a subject that has become increasingly addressed over time online, in more ways than one. On one hand, it has opened up the possibility for creators to be honest and genuine with how they feel to help them overcome the issues they struggle with behind the scenes, which encourages the audience to relate and believe that they are not alone. It's provided a platform for celebrities and supporters alike to be understood despite their vastly different lifestyles. And on the other hand, it has become the most abused and misused topic in covering internet drama over recent years. The sheer amount of misinformation, distrust, and tomfoolery surrounding mental health on the internet is astounding, especially when YouTube drama comes into question. Today I will attempt to document how and why mental health's increased awareness on the internet has unfortunately made it an easy scapegoat for large creators and the major loophole behind that. Not only this, but how a major misunderstanding of the constructs regarding mental health and the stigma around it has made people become easy targets of criticism. Prepare yourselves for this one, lads. We're about to indulge in a little bit of consolidating.
That depression and mental health issues is the biggest shield in the world.
That what you put into my head made me want to kill myself!
I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys, I've just been kind of sad.
Even some of your critics were worried about your well-being.
I didn't really do a good job at accurately representing how much it affected the rest of my life.
I did try to end my life at the beginning of 2017.
Part of me feels like that doesn't even matter anymore.
Alright, how's it going, lads? It's the distorted stick figure with an extremely handsome moustache here to provide some perspective. And man, do we have some perspective today. I must admit I have felt quite reluctant to make this video because I'm going to have to talk a little bit about my own associates in this one. Likewise, the way that I'm addressing different internet celebrities in this one might sound like I'm being a bit pathetic, but that's not exactly what this is. When focusing on YouTube and Twitter drama for a tad too much time, such as myself, you eventually begin to notice patterns that generally occur. These patterns could consist of the audience constantly shifting to either side of the extreme when a minuscule amount of new evidence comes out, or alternatively when people's responses to accusations gradually get more and more professional every time they're conducted. Regardless, when it appears that you have no life outside of the internet, like me, you're bound to notice some repeats in history. Let me say that again. You're bound to notice some repeats in history. A pattern that I have noticed is becoming somewhat prominent but seldom addressed is the use and debasement of the concept of mental health. What interests me is that almost every single time this concept is brought up within internet drama, it is treated in one of three ways, depending on the person involved. Say for example, when Suzy Lu claimed that the immense amount of criticism towards her made her feel on edge, it was immediately thrown under the rug and she was viewed as even more of a laughingstock. People claim that she weaponized the idea of mental health for personal gain, which she did kind of genuinely do, but we'll get to that later. And yet when somebody such as Alinity expresses that videos mocking her are damaging to her, she is somehow showered with support and several of her detractors apologize to her directly. Sometimes, very rarely however, we come across an example such as the case of Boblax's copyright striking controversy. The majority of the people did account for the fact that he felt bad for what he did and pitied him, but did not let that discount what he had actually done. Today I would like to discuss why there is such a divide here, what is generally the response, and what perhaps should be the reaction. I would like to address what weaponizing mental health actually is, and how we know when it occurs. Right then, I suppose we should crack on with it. I guess we should start with the basics in asking what weaponizing mental health is and how it even works. As defined by the dictionary that doesn't exist and I actually just made up, weaponizing mental health is the misuse of and abuse of a bad mental state / condition for the purpose of scrutinizing another individual, most commonly one's detractors. The concept of weaponizing mental health comes in several different forms, because it's such a widely misunderstood idea on the YouTube platform. For one, people use it to describe when a YouTube creator will claim to be in a dark place after getting into controversy. The stereotype is that it's often used seemingly to lessen the criticism against them because they're not feeling well and because they're getting into a lot of trouble. This is what this video is mainly focusing on. In other cases, pretty similar to the first, people reference it when a creator talks about their anxiety or autism as a means of silencing the criticism towards them, often using it as an excuse for their actions and not really taking accountability. People bring up their mental disorders such as depression or even ADHD as a means means of explaining why they would do something stupid, potentially hoping that people would understand and therefore not be as harsh on them as they were before. The final of the three forms, and potentially the most clear-cut one, is when a creator will attempt to discredit another by using somebody else's mental health as a talking point or assigning them with a mental disorder, diagnosing people as sociopaths with very little substantial proof and things of that nature, something professionals such as Katie Morton have done, and likewise random commentary creators have done, such as I'm Alex. In other cases, creators will bring up issues somebody clearly feels bad about in their big expose videos, and shoving it in their faces for the sake of argument, claiming how bad of a person they were for either contributing to that person's bad mental state or essentially blaming them for this person's issues, such as when Ethan Klein frequently blamed Keemstar for FusiTube's deterioration a few years ago within Ethan's Content Nuke Keemstar video. An alternative example would be Keemstar blaming Ethan Klein for making multiple people feel suicide. Wait a minute. Can these two even catch a break with each other? Blimmin'. That said, mental health has been such a taboo topic for so long in this platform, and it seems that many YouTubers have found it difficult to actually come out of their way to discuss how they feel due to the fear of being judged by their audience for something they can't even control. This is especially during controversy. This is an issue that is surprisingly not short of being covered on the platform already, though in spite of this it's still a very misunderstood topic. An example of a decent video in particular on this whole idea was created by the YouTube channel known as Hyojin, in which he discusses the stigma of Kanye West talking about his mental health in some drama he got into on Twitter or something. I'm not too into the celebrity gossip and I'm not really interested on that side of things. The point here is that her video talks about how difficult it is for celebrities to come out about this sort of thing. It's obviously a pretty serious issue in that respect. However, fortunately, since around 2016, people have begun to become far more honest with themselves and their audience regarding the topic of mental health. Occasionally, creators would come out of the woodwork to admit that what they're dealing with might not be as easy as it seems to some. Being a YouTuber is possibly a dream job to many, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't got its struggles that the creators have to deal with.
You said that you were a victim of anxiety and panic attacks, but you didn't pull the victim card, which has really impressed me. And I think that's why you connected with so many people, because it didn't come from a fraudulent place.
Mental health is a very real thing, and whether you're a super beastly Colonel Kurtz character on YouTube that does not back down, or an aggressively weak stick figure like me, you're still prone to facing difficulty, and that's perfectly alright. The problem here is that since mental health has become publicized so much on the internet, it has also become more of a misused thing. Because of this subsequent awareness, or I reckon you could even say lack of proper awareness, there is a common stereotype that young children will have one argument with their parents and then proceed to change all of their social media profiles to say that they've been diagnosed with depression. Believe it or not, this is also something that a lot of YouTube creators will do, just slightly differently. There is not only more of a widespread knowledge of mental health and awareness of it, but there is also far more misunderstanding. In the past, creators such as Spetchy or Prince E have made videos probably with good intentions that ended up being filled to the brim with misinformation about depression and handed them a lot of criticism. From my understanding, Spetchy at the time was dealing with some genuine issues, and unfortunately still is, but a lack of understanding backfired heavily because of the commentary channel scrutinizing her video to a major extent. Perhaps to an extent a couple of pixels too far. Prince E's lack of understanding of the difference between the mood and the disorder of depression also received a lot of negative feedback.
Imagine this remote control is depression. Depression comes, it goes, it comes, it stays for a while.
Content creator Boy in a Band made an excellent video about this topic, in which he had contacted several experts to address aspects of Prince E's videos that may have been misinformed. Somehow, this is one of the best commentary videos and it isn't even by a commentary channel. That says something. Katie Morton and our pal Shane Dawson likewise contributed to the negative stigma around antisocial personality disorder from their series about Jake Paul, in which Katie labelled him as exactly that, simply based off of what appeared to be the Google results of traits of a sociopath. The funniest part is that Katie was also brought onto the series as a psychologist. The twist is, though, that she doesn't even specialize in that area.
This is not my specialty.
There was quite a bit of misinformation spread there.
Hey everybody, if you haven't heard yet, I wrote a book. It's called Are You Okay?
I think the best thing about those documentaries, the only good thing about those documentaries was that my boy Fraser was featured in it. What a legend. Just like in the Jake Paul documentaries, in fact even in the Jake Paul documentaries, a platform that our homie Shane Dawson as well as multiple other creators have promoted was BetterHelp, which had its own huge ordeal. The platform was designed to be an online therapy service. Sounds fantastic, but unfortunately their services were substantially below mediocre and there was a lot of corruption involved. As PewDiePie described it in one of his videos about it, they wanted to mass produce therapy with more than 4 million users on their platform, and somehow all of them were being helped by a licensed professional. His video is really good, by the way, I'd highly recommend it. Despite this though, multiple creators blindly promoted the platform and cheerfully took the money from their sponsorships and affiliate links. Nice. There's actually an extensive list of people that promoted this, potentially ignoring the very faint warning sirens in the background. On top of all these shenanigans, this whole idea of spreading misinformation isn't helped by the fact that it's a common joke how people make their entire personality the fact that they have some sort of disorder that they assign to themselves, such as ADHD. A lot of YouTubers trivialize people's struggles. The audience doesn't help with that either, in videos such as whatever this is. I mean to say, mental health online has become a very honest, widespread and relatable topic of discussion, so that brings in the first major issue, the abuse of quite how relatable it is. Well, like the annoying game show that we are, let's have a look at the creators' extremely odd attitude towards weaponizing their mental health. A common critique that many commentators will give other YouTubers is that they hide away from criticism using mental health, or perhaps are too pathetic to take criticism, so they resort to comments about how their distractors made them feel. There are proportionally large number of examples of this. A lot of the time this point of shielding criticism is actually pretty justified. Say for example Def Noodles announcing adamantly that Kavos' game show entitled Make or Break, in which he reviewed Dennis the Menace's channel, made our Rawman friend here want to quit YouTube. Def using this as a way to actually discredit Kavos is a pretty low blow. Therefore he's been critiqued for it more than the average Joe, or rather the average Dennis. Another such example was at the time a small commentary YouTuber known as Woken, who actively accused other people of making him feel very low right after an unfortunate mental breakdown, while simultaneously saying that it was not a big deal. My mate Zog made a very entertaining video about this, so I've little to no reason to go into too much detail here. In other cases, it is not uncommon for YouTubers to admit to being at a low point after being dealt a substantial amount of criticism. YouTubers including the likes of Deji will use it as a way of looking like the victim in their respective controversies.
I hate being seen as a bad guy!
I was very emotional at this time when he was laughing.
I hate it so much and I'm tired of it!
Not a lot of truth is being said about me. At least he's laughing.
In Deji's case specifically, this is shown in the annoyingly extended controversy with his brother KSI, in which when JJ decided to laugh at his brother's expense, Deji got upset and saying that he was at a low point at the time of the video clip being taken and expressed distaste with KSI laughing at the situation. Whilst you could argue for or against Deji's position, there is no doubt that he was addressing it out of left field with the purpose of making himself look better and directing the criticism away from himself. A lot of scrutiny was sent in his direction at the time, and judging by his pattern of behaviour, this example looks like a way to make him look better. This is what a lot of creators appear to do, like Pokimane, about 3 or 4 times a day now. Likewise, many creators will use mental health to gain sympathy in order to overpower the criticism against them and prevent people from talking about the criticism against them. This is a sneaky and slimy tactic that is a lovely get out of jail free card for a lot of content creators. Not a literal one, but most commonly, actually sometimes it is a literal one. Take Laura Lee as an example of this in her extraordinarily famous, or infamous, apology video. The one where she confesses for whatever makeup shenanigans she got into. In her apology video, she is seen crying for a rough estimation of 313% of the video. This was no doubt utterly and obviously with the intention of looking like the one that was going through a lot of difficulty. Just wanted to also mention, I absolutely adore this video for reasons that are quite obvious. In this example, almost nobody pitied her because of her hilariously fake crying. However, this concept can be warped in a dark and twisted way.
This thing has ruined my life, and I hate saying this. I don't want people to know. That gives them the power, and that makes them feel righteous about what they've done to my life. But it's not fair. It's not fair that I keep constantly having to just repeat myself over and over again.
Here comes the absolutist problem of this method. There are bound to be some dodgy individuals, if you get my drift, that successfully manage to pervert the narrative by claiming to be in a bad state of mind, which they probably were, to be fair. Take Lionmaker as probably the most famous and likewise most egregious examples of this. Within his interview with Circus Man, Colossal is Crazy, back in 2016, he spent so much time talking about the accusations and how they had harmed his mental well-being. For those of you who've been living under a rock, he was actually convicted of these accusations, which was announced by Colossal himself on the Mom's Basement podcast. Just so that you know that I'm not being a tad biased here. Lionmaker, though guilty of all charges, perfectly articulated the problems with false narratives spreading around the internet like this and how it can completely wreck somebody's pride. Sure, actually being guilty probably had a similar effect on him, but what he says does feel a tad interesting knowing the truth of the situation.
But it's not fair. It's not fair that I keep constantly having to just repeat myself over and over again. All in the meantime, while I have lost absolutely everything, when it comes to the dream that I was pursuing.
It's an extreme amount of pain that he implied he had to go through, and judging by Colossal's response at the end of the interview and likewise the community's reaction to the video, the vast majority definitely did not believe him over this point. But when I first listened to the interview on the 6th of November 2016, I will admit that to a degree I did pity him. So did Colossal in a way. If he was innocent, that sounds egregious. He was very manipulative, and I would not be surprised if his extremely young audience believed his word. As of his return to YouTube in 2020, he did actually still have a favourably dedicated audience that did pity him. He warped the situation into making himself look like an innocent young man destroyed by the YouTube community to the point of feeling like he couldn't do anything at all. I'll be honest though, I don't think a lion can really do much prowling around these streets, but alas. That's the underlying danger of this whole issue. While mental health is taken so seriously in a way, it is also easily abused with how seriously it is taken. You never understand fully when somebody's being serious. Another well-known example of this method is actually Cosmodore, frequently complaining about how overbearing the negative response was to him admitting his deeds and trying to justify what he did. In his video entitled Defending Myself, he actually managed to convince approximately 2,000 people to agree with him. I think out of the two, he took way more accountability, but his multiple responses and attempts to come back to the platform still seem a bit off.
They were only so much affected that I was very much distraught after all this. Like, I had many mental breakdowns over all this.
In both of these examples, two definitively and self-admittedly guilty people made an attempt to bring pity towards themselves, potentially because the amount of negativity heading towards them was extremely difficult to cope with. I'm about to intentionally foreshadow right here and say that obviously even being as guilty as they are, it's not going to be an easy thing to deal with. In both examples, judging by their most recent footage of themselves,
You see, I'm dumb, but I can't feel it.
they don't appear to be in very good condition. Out of the two, I think Cosmo appears to be a lot more sincere and has taken a lot more accountability, as already mentioned. But you know, I doubt many people are going to let him off anytime soon. Especially here, the problem is that neither of these people are in very good shape because frankly, so many people heavily dislike them. One could say it's for good reason, of course, but they are clean-cut pieces of line kill that show the impact of being under so much scrutiny. People being under scrutiny does severe damage to them even if they are in the wrong. In fact, I think that sometimes makes it even worse. Take our lovely lad Alex here, for example. He's had hundreds of conflicts involving backstabbing his friends and things of that sort. Specifically in 2019, he very mysteriously stopped uploading and claimed to be very low shortly after the whole Slazo situation transpired. Obviously that situation was such a kerfuffle, and I actually doubt that Alex has really been able to recover his reputation from it, unlike most of the others involved. Alex's response to Slazo's video that corrected the record was extremely poor and especially did not look good in conjunction with the James Charles situation, and now on top of this is the Zaptie and the Solid Shive situations. After the Slazo ordeal and Alex's arguably major trip-up, according to the right opinion within his retrospective about it, he claims that, quote,
I've known him for ages and he's been having a rough time recently, so I don't want to give him grief. He has apologized since, but it would be dishonest for me to pretend he doesn't exist.
Alex has many issues for sure, and it's not like they haven't been covered within the 7 billion expose videos about him, but it's not like he's immune to mental health issues, just pointing that out. You can be the judge of whether him feeling that way was deserved and whatever, of course. I mean, it was a pretty gargantuan situation right there. The point is that he was in the wrong, absolutely so, but he isn't exempt from feeling bad about it. Alex never publicly weaponized this to my knowledge, which I think is a good point on his behalf, so good job, fella. Now you see over here, it's not only big and evil creators that are definitively in the wrong that use this method. In fact, there are countless examples of people directly abusing their position of influence on their community to block out criticism and or just gain sympathy. The content creator Suzy Lu is interestingly infamous for her controversy regarding this issue. Suzy is an interesting one, because for me she is where I first explicitly noticed this apparent dilemma, and of which I feel like I was the only person. For those who somehow don't know, Suzy Lu is a content creator that suddenly hit the YouTube commentary scene in full force after some of my mates created content addressing her issuing a false copyright strike on a creator known as Mark After Dark, while simultaneously uploading stolen anime reaction content on her channel, as well as reporting any negative videos about her, amongst the too many other things that have been covered in their 1 billion videos about the topic. Seriously, I'm not against making loads of videos on the same person, but after the 50th video I was beginning to feel a little bit tired of it, I'm not gonna lie. While I will openly admit that I am guilty of using her name in the title of one of my videos, content on her was not uncommon throughout April to July 2020. Sure, the criticism was warranted and she made a lot of mistakes, but you don't necessarily have to be in the right to feel bad when you receive a lot of flack. That raises the question, how did Suzy feel? Well, that much isn't so clear. She and her lovely boyfriend Stejo were very defensive publicly and loved fighting back with the old commentary crew, such as Stejo still appearing on streams talking about their detractors as the day of writing, and Suzy making a video entitled The Real Tea, which was a great video for reasons Suzy probably wouldn't appreciate. On the outside, they seemed to be standing strong. On the inside, they were probably doing alright, well at least so we thought. On the 15th of May 2020, Suzy dropped an Instagram post with an extremely extensive caption. A lot of it seemed to be essentially nothing, where she complains about thinking she's done nothing wrong and how she doesn't think the criticism is deserved. But she raises a point that a lot of people were perhaps even too quick to overlook. Within the post, Suzy claims that, quote, "The other night I went for a walk at 2 AM with no intention of returning home. I sat in the pitch black alone and wondered WTF was the point of living." Immediately after posting that, friends of mine decided to laugh at her for it and how pathetic it looks. Sure, I wouldn't deny that a lot of that post was actually pretty pathetic, and some of the stuff she says is a bit of a funny juxtaposition from what she actually did. But where do we draw the line? How do we know that she was lying, and was it truly appropriate to respond in the way that people did? I raise this question. If somebody's claiming to have been on the brink of ending their life like that, do we really make a video rapping to the post, or do we take it more seriously? You can claim that Suzy had too much of an ego to do anything drastic, but keep in mind that Shane Dawson said the exact same thing when they falsely accused James Charles, and he was almost pushed over the edge. Listen up, alright, you can never rummage around inside somebody's head. Sure, you can measure the size of the outside like some extremely hilarious comedian that you are, but that doesn't mean you can measure what's going on inside. I'm not blaming my mates for laughing at the post, it was extremely bad, but was it right to jump on the joke? Of course, in this case it turned out that she was perhaps lying, as not long after she released a video with her crying in the thumbnail entitled Goodbye.
What is up, everyone, and welcome back to more Naruto Shippuden. I am here today with episode 133.
The video turned out to be another one of her anime reactions, but decided to clickbait it in what I would assume would either be a suicide note or a quitting YouTube video.
No!
She later admitted that it was made with the intention of baiting commentary channels. Thank you, Kiwi Farms of all places, for that information. In my opinion, this was a really dodgy move, not helping her admittedly poor case of it all. My point about jumping on the bandwagon and laughing at her still stands, however. It's manipulative, sure, but how can you tell it's manipulative in a plain wall of text from an Instagram post? So, Suzy Lu may have genuinely been manipulative in that situation, and her video was very distasteful. Far more distasteful than the people that originally laughed at her Instagram post. But here's the thing. There is a good chance that she was actually dealing with depressive and suicidal thoughts. Unfortunately though, we may never know the full context of this because she's blocked both of my accounts and I can't reach out to her. Oh well. So what about somebody that we do kinda know the context of? Well, let's look around the corner and behind the meme. For a long while, this gentleman had been a strong and albeit undeserved laughingstock of the internet for people describing him using a word that you could either use as a horoscope or as an awful disease. After several years of constantly being the butt of the joke, which is rather understandable, I mean his name was behind the meme for goodness sake, he uploaded a series of videos on his YouTube channel that appeared to be extremely on edge and convinced a concerning number of people that he was on the way to doing something drastic. So many people, this included the young and innocent me that had seen a post about it on Reddit, went out of their way to attempt to send him some support and help him out. It turned out, however, that this was a series of what he called skits, emulating a person struggling with mental health to represent how he had felt in the past and the end of his channel. Many people were understandably upset with him for this because a huge number of people had showered him with support during the course of those videos, whereas the reality was that he was making these skits for the purpose of them being skits. The main criticism towards him that he was manipulating the fact that everybody hated him and transformed it into a means of playing the victim cards as a final say. Many YouTubers that I enjoy watching made videos about this and aggressively ran after him for those videos. Sure, they were justified in being upset by this situation, but this is where the dilemma really begins to show here. While this is most definitely a clear-cut example of somebody manipulating their audience into caring about them because of their mental health, we can't directly tell that it was not built off of genuine thoughts. It might well have been. He made those videos to gain sympathy. The question is whether that sympathy was warranted or not. When you compare Suzy and... I don't know what to call him for short. Behind? So when you compare Suzy and this bloke, something interesting begins to show. They both use their position of being disliked to reflect the criticism offered themselves to gain sympathy, which is a really useful tool in the naughty creator's back pocket. Looking at you, Pokimane. The criticism towards somebody can be harshly damaging to their credibility, and it can be worth covering in as many videos as you want because that's what's fun about YouTube. I'm not going to make a moral grandstand about commentary videos. I'd be a hypocrite and likewise a party pooper. But here's the issue, alright? Though both of which have publicly admitted to genuinely feeling suicidal? Do we take their word for it and believe them, or do we relentlessly mock them and only backtrack if they do make an inevitably drastic decision? Here's where we bring in the dilemma itself. Mr. Meme and Little Miss Lu are definitely in the wrong for what they did. There is absolutely no doubt about it. But in the words of Dennis the Menace, owner of the Deaf Noodles YouTube channel, sometimes there is a little bit of truth behind it. Now you're perfectly justified in thinking, oh well, I mean it's Suzy Lu and behind the meme, for crying out loud. Does this matter? Well, I suppose it makes sense that you may not be so convinced. So let's look at a more serious example.
Ed told me that he was a diagnosed social.
That's kind of the sign of somebody who's self-destructing.
A situation that, let's not forget, Zaptie admitted put him in the hospital.
To the point that I was going to kill myself.
I'll let you decide who's the enemy, who's the enemy, who's the enemy. I'll let you decide who's the enemy. I'm the enemy. I'm the enemy.
Let me introduce you to an old friend of ours, Zaptie. If you don't know, back in the day, Zaptie was a substantial creator within the commentary community in 2016, making content high above the quality of his peers. In fact, a lot of my videos are heavily inspired by his. He was highly respected until he was accused of being a sociopath on his own Hot Wet Soup podcast in an episode entitled The End, and was subsequently accused of being a paedophile. You know, a very mild thing to be accused of. For those of you that for some reason know about the controversy as a whole and still don't know about the recent revision of the whole situation, he was essentially innocent all along. He got backstabbed by his friends, or in Elvis's eyes not really his friends, and was catfished by somebody he never even exchanged photographs with. I've called out my good pal Nicholas Diorio in this video, so I think it's justified in promoting him. He made a brilliant series of videos revisiting the accusations and debunking them. He even did an interview with the teddy bear himself. Nick is a true boss for doing this, I will tell you that. Anyway, in the interview with the Oreo, as well as in one of his twit-longers from when the accusations came out, Zaptie admits that the situation made him feel terribly suicidal and he had to go to hospital.
I was like, okay, well, I don't have much of a personal life at the moment, and now the internet hates me. It's go time. That was legitimately my thought process.
As you can tell within this clip, Zaptie openly expressed how he didn't tell anybody about how he was feeling because he was concerned that they would feel that he was using it to deflect criticism. This issue has reached an extent that people who are perfectly innocent, mind you, feel that they can't reach out due to the fear of their cries for help being disregarded entirely. This begs to question who else has been struck by this fear. Is the concern that people will be laughed at by the community extending too far? Because as wrong as Suzy, for example, may have been, I once again ask what's up inside that little noggin of hers. The negative stigma around the mistreatment around mental health is not diminished, but rather cultivated by the act of scrutinizing the people that express their position with it. Because keep note, Zaptie had to be hospitalized. I've already mentioned this, but it's worth bringing up again. James Charles had a very similar case during his controversy in 2019, when Tati Westbrook dropped the nuclear bomb known as Bye Sister. James admitted that he too was pushed to an absolute brink during this period, despite a certain someone saying that his ego was too big for that to happen. Obviously, since then, James has been accused of a couple of other things and has admitted to most of them, which is a shame, but at the time he was pushed to the absolute brink by her video, and people relentlessly disregarded the possibility that he was innocent. Sure, for something as serious as this, the reaction is understandable, but in the words of BWC, drama is drama. It's part of life, but it should never go as far as taking life. Similarly, with a now very controversial commentary Twitter artist known as Hyojin, she was one of the main instigators of the Slazo situation amongst many other flaws in her character and was rightfully deserving of a colossal amount of criticism. But she was ruthlessly lambasted by the community during the Slazo conflict, because after all she did contribute to ruining Michael's life. Absolutely all boundaries were crossed, it seems, except I suppose convergent boundaries. To my knowledge, she started acting irrational on all social media and people began to laugh at her because of what she had done to Slazo. Once again, people had a good laugh at her bad Instagram posts. People most likely saw it as a ploy to, here it is again like one bad friend that clearly can't take a hint, to shield from criticism. She was only treated with more care after she made the ever so infamous tweet, and now for my next trick, I'm going to, yeah, I'm sure you know the rest of it. Even then, many people within those nonsensical commentary group chats I was a part of at the time were very critical of her even after she was hospitalized. I reckon Lena says it best here in his response to the whole situation. So what do we take from this? Well, this actually begs the question, do we wait until somebody is on the absolute edge before treating them better?
Because if I didn't have the friends and family that I do, who were there supporting me so much at the time, I don't know what would have happened.
It makes me wonder if this is morally bankrupt or not. I'll openly admit that I have participated in multiple situations addressed within this video so far, and at the time I saw no problem with it. You obviously can feel free to have a clear-cut principle of anybody that deserves criticism will get it no matter how much it harms them, but that doesn't sound so efficient to me personally. Does Alinity really have to have a mental breakdown on stream and constantly complain about how she is treated for people to actually care a little bit about how she feels? Well, no, apparently. She has to do quite a bit more than that because people still haven't forgiven her for what she's done. Does this take away from what she did? No, of course it doesn't, mate. What she did was clearly pretty bad, and I won't make an attempt to justify the stuff that she got into controversy for, but nobody deserves to be at such a low position. I mean, really, it's up to her cat to say if she should be forgiven anytime soon, I reckon. I think my whole point here is that you can never judge intention, or to act like a parent teaching their child basic morals, you can't judge a book by its cover. Ugh, that didn't feel right. You can't really see what somebody else is thinking at any stage, and especially can't when it's a faceless content creator. Somebody can easily just say that they're in an awful position and the community is somehow meant to deal with that. Where do you draw the line and when do you draw it? One of the reasons the Pieman situation from December 2020 was so big was because the 15-year-old claimed something extremely sad and released no substantial proof, so people were meant to judge it at face value. He didn't need to provide any proof when he felt that way because he shouldn't have needed to feel that way at all. But the fact that there was no substantial proof is what caused people, including my mate John Swan, to have had the opinion that he was lying. The two of them, meaning John Swan and Pieman, have apparently resolved the situation in private, and I hope they can both move on from it, which I suppose it appears they have done. No discredit to either of them here, it's just a really good example. The Pieman kid didn't deserve to feel the way that he felt, but in the same way, what he was being lambasted by the community for shouldn't simply be excused because of the way he was treated. In actuality, you can still claim that what he said was a little bit off note.
But they were in a chat and like multiple people were acting sexually with this girl. I find that very peculiar. I find that very strange. No, I don't think there's any pedophilia there. I don't think that's even relevant to this story. I don't know, like, I know kids don't have very good social awareness sometimes, but for me that was like a bit too far.
This brings to light people with the likes of Pokimane, Speechy, Woken, and even Angelika Oles, whether they were truly justified in being treated the way that they were, and whether they were truly justified in telling people that they were not in a good position. All of the latter have made very harsh mistakes, and all of them have likewise abused their mental instability to deflect criticism, but it brings the dilemma to light. Were they justified in doing so? After speaking with Angelika in particular during the situation where she was getting a ton of backlash after old clips about the James Charles situation, and no, it wasn't just one single quote tweet, you can be quiet about that narrative, she said the famous phrase, "I guess I'll fix my mental health in 2022.
I was hoping last video was going to be my last video about James Charles.
Those big commentary channels that you think like you, they don't.
They're pretty strong words, Angelika.
I'm Alex would counter this by mentioning he's been bashed for making lighter takes than you.
In this specific case, it was an incredibly manipulative time to bring it up, because she was in the middle of being criticized for some of the old stuff, but she definitely does have struggles. This is confirmed by people that know her personally. She has mental health problems, and that's not exactly going to be helped by petty internet drama. At the same time, however, her mental health shouldn't simply be an excuse for what she actually has done. Angelika could have been using her mental state to deflect criticism, so it's not worth blindly excusing. However, she is genuinely facing difficulty that I heavily sympathize with her for, so there is a good chance that she means well. Ironically though, I think that somewhat answers the dilemma being assessed in this video.
Now, a lot of people gave him criticism for this comment, claiming that he was trying to use suicide as a scapegoat. But that's a very shaky argument for me on its own. At the end of the day, we all have mindsets that can affect our actions, and if that was the one that affected MiniLadd's actions, then so be it. Although what he did was extremely wrong and his position assumes accountability, being an adult does not make you an infallible being.
I think after all these different debacles I've covered, it's still important to note that if you do something obscene, you've done something obscene. The criticism is important to focus on without bringing your emotions into it, so that it couldn't be misinterpreted in a way. I say this because it's a well-known fact that often abusive relationships become abusive, namely due to weaponizing suicide, such as with the unfortunate case of MiniLadd. However, in the same way, no matter the amount of criticism toward you, that does not invalidate the difficulty that you're going through, even if you have done something arguably pretty dumb. One of the main reasons I'm making this video in the first place is because I've become extremely tired of the sheer hypocrisy from large T and commentary creators that will cherry pick who they want to account for when it comes to mental health and who they will lambast no matter what. Namely the T channels that will preach very loudly about how bad Jeffree Star is for damaging people's mental state, and then will proceed to make yet another video on one of Gabbie Hanna's mental breakdowns, saying that she's insane. Honestly, I'm tired of the lack of awareness and lack of self-awareness from tea creators when it comes to this idea. One individual whom I do not mean to scrutinize, of which is merely a good example, congratulations on the pregnancy by the way, even directly tweeted harsh comments toward Gabbie Hanna and then proceeded to state that arguing with my mate Boblax put stress on her baby? So it's alright when Gabbie Hanna is being targeted and not you? Gabbie Hanna has tens if not hundreds of things to be criticized for. Mocking her actual issues and saying that she's abusing them feels a tad disingenuous to me. Another example is H3H3. I don't dislike the guy by any means, but I'll be extremely honest, I feel exhausted having to listen to him bring up a certain suicide victim and claiming that Keemstar was the reason they took their life.
A YouTuber that he bullied, essentially, into unaliving himself.
He's implied it hundreds of times, and he outright said it several times. I'm not naming this individual because I initially wasn't going to bring up any actual victims in this video, because honestly it's just sad that people have ended their life and are being used as talking points for commentary videos. This isn't only aimed at Ethan either, just do better. While this is all going on, Ethan is still doing videos about Gabbie Hanna, laughing about setting up an opportunity to make her have a mental breakdown on their podcast. So he has very little room to say that Keemstar is the cause of these issues here without looking like at least a little bit of a hypocrite. The way I see it, mental health is not a point for your commentary video, it's a completely separate entity. It shouldn't be a reason to prevent a video from being made, nor should it be the thing that causes a video to be made. In the same way, mental health should not be an excuse for your own inane actions. However, if it prevents you from responding properly, that's fine. Focus on it first and then do your best to form a rational response. So to wrap up this jumbled mess of points, mental health on the platform is still and will continue to be hugely misunderstood by the general consensus of YouTube. Nobody without a degree in psychology will be able to play proper judge, jury and counselor when it comes to internet drama. This of course raises a gigantic loophole that seems to be becoming increasingly difficult to deal with. For one, a semi-popular YouTube creator can genuinely be in a dark place and get pushed down by the people for it because they do not understand the creator's position.
I've never really had to go through something like this before.
On the other hand, somebody could actually be lying to everybody and be guilty of manipulating the audience and still get away with it on a detrimental scale because of the immediate belief of the creator.
Stating that the drama channels want you to kill yourself is just blatantly false.
I have no simple definitive answer to this dilemma because, as I said, I'm no expert, but I reckon I have had a bit of experience in the drama field, so I suppose I can give my piece. I think a decent place to start addressing this problem would be to tread with care when somebody weaponizes their circumstances, but do not let it deflect the criticism they need to address or focus on. If somebody is receiving heaps of criticism and they make some kind of reference to not feeling well, don't act like they're definitively twisting their story, because you never know, you could get into your own situation that's very similar. You won't be the one laughing in that case. It's not about making critical content or points against somebody. All of that is completely fine by all means. In this YouTube territory, it's something that you have to be built to deal with. That's one of the consequences of being a YouTuber, but it's rather about consistency. To sound like a pathetic and overbearing teacher, you reap what you sow. You're going to be treated with the same attitude that you treat others. Likewise, if it's one of your friends and you treat them with more respect, but others with more scrutiny, that may seem a bit biased and misleading. Without jumping on a huge steam train and tooting my own whistle, personally over the past year or so as of writing, this has been my aim. I think it's important to be able to help people out in more ways than one, dealing with the influx of criticism, valid or not, and addressing the criticism properly in a collected manner. Nobody wants to be the topic of a commentary video unless it fuels some kind of pitiful ego, so I suppose you've got to prepare on how to manage controversy properly, appropriately, and with your chin up. If you make 700 tweets shouting at other people and flaunting your success despite being in the wrong, your cries for help are definitely not going to work out so eloquently. And while sometimes reaching out to people definitely doesn't work, like with Deaf Noodles or Suzy Lu, there are people that would be perfectly open to listening when you give them a real chance, as with my experience with Angelika Oles, Pieman, Harley TBS, and even John Swan. Your 5-hour commentary videos about how somebody is a danger to YouTube society won't always work if the person is in an emotionally bad position. Once again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't make them, but don't expect your 40-minute rant video with Super Scribblenauts gameplay about how terrible somebody is for faking a suicide to look good 3 months into the future when you do a very similar thing. Because at the end of the day, why are you criticizing this person? If it's to get that bag, it's mildly immoral, but I don't mind that personally. However, is your critique based solely solely on jumping on the bandwagon and pushing other people down, or are you actually attempting to help somebody become a better person? Sometimes the former option seems to be more apparent, judging by how difficult it is for some people to redeem themselves in the public eye. Direct assessments of somebody's character are perfectly alright and can be really helpful in pushing somebody to address an issue. They can also be proper funny, but if a person is not mentally smooth, sometimes they require being addressed more rationally, else they would probably just completely ignore your criticism. At the end of the day, creators can be overconfident and aggressive in public, but you never 100% know what's going on behind their little noggin. Somebody can abuse their power, influence, and the trust of their audience, but there is never a full-on certainty. And I suppose that's the dilemma of YouTubers weaponizing mental health.